She knew the sound of his boots. That was the thing that kept Maggie awake at 3 a.m. Not the wind howling through the valley, but the silence where his footsteps should have been. The shift whistle had blown an hour ago. The other trucks had already rumbled past her window, their headlights sweeping across the ceiling like but Caleb's truck wasn't there. Maggie stood at the screen door, her hand pressing against the mesh until it left a grid on her palm. In the distance, towards the mine, a siren began to wail. It started low, a mournful growl, before climbing into a scream that tore the night apart. She didn't cry. She just stopped breathing. The diner was called the Rusty Scuttle, and it smelled of bacon grease, stale cigarette smoke, and the faint, metallic temps of coal dust that the men tracked in with them. It was 1978, and the coal boom was alive and well in Harlan County. Money was flowing, but it was dirty money, earned in blood and sweat. Caleb Halloway walked in at 11:30 p.m. He was 24, but he walked like a man of 40. His shoulders were broad, thickened by swinging a sledge and setting timbers. His face was scrubbed, but the black ring around his eyes, the Minos mascara, never really washed off. It was tattooed into the lash line. He took the booth in the back, the one with a torn vinyl seat. He didn't have to order. Maggie was already there with the pot. "Black, 2 sugars?" she said, her voice cutting through the noise of the jukebox playing Waylon Jennings. Maggie O'Connor was the kind of woman who held the world together. She was 20, with hair the color of dried wheat and eyes that saw too much. Her father was a union rep who had lost a leg in '65. She knew the cost of the coal. She swore she'd never marry a miner. She wanted a banker or a lawyer, someone whose hands were soft and who came home at 5 p.m. every day. But then she looked at Caleb. He looked up at her, his blue eyes striking against the lingering gray of his skin. "Thanks, Mags. You look beat, Caleb." Section 3 again. Section 3. He nodded, wrapping his large, scarred hands around the ceramic mug. "Roof is bad. Wet. Dropping slate every 10 feet. "You'll be careful," she said. "The automatic prayer of every woman in the county. Always M." He watched her walk away. He liked the way she commanded the room. He liked that she didn't pity the men, but she respected them. For Caleb, the mine was just a job. It was the only job that paid enough to build a house, to buy a truck, to maybe, one day, raise a family. But looking at Maggie, he started to want those things sooner rather than later. He left a $5 bill under his cup. A full shift's wage was only about $60 back then, so a $5 tip was a statement. It was a promise. Courting in coal country is dictated by the whistle. You date in the margins of the shift. They went to the drive-in on Friday nights when Caleb was on day shift. They sat in his beat-up Chevy, the speaker box crackling with the sound of Grease or Superman, but they rarely watched the movie. They talked about the future. "I want a house on the ridge," Caleb said one night, tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb. His skin was rough, like sandpaper, but his touch was gentle. Away from the creek, no flooding. "And I want a garden," Maggie whispered. "Tomatoes? Corn. And I don't want to worry, Caleb. I don't want to live like my mama did, pacing the floor every time it storms." Caleb went quiet. The air in the truck grew heavy. "It's good money, Mags. 5 years. I give M5 good years. We stack the cash, and I open a garage. Fix cars. No underground." "5 years is a long time," she said, looking away. "A lot can happen in 5 years. I'm safe. I'm the safest man on the crew. Everyone says that. Until they aren't." Despite the fear, Talau grew. It grew like the kudzu on the side of the road, fast, tangled, and impossible to rip out. Caleb asked her to marry him 6 months later. He didn't have a ring. Not yet. He proposed with a promise and a down payment on that plot of land on the ridge. She said yes, but she said it with a knot in her stomach. The wedding was set for June. The spring rains were heavy that year. The creeks were high, and the pressure in the mines was changing. Caleb picked up extra shifts. He wanted to pay for the dress. He wanted to pay for the honeymoon and he was working doubles, 16 hours straight. "You're too tired," Maggie argued one morning as he packed his pail. "Your eyes are red. Caleb, you're gonna make a mistake." "I'm fine," he snapped, the fatigue making him short-tempered. "I'm doing this for us. I'd rather have a poor husband than a rich memory," said Sodbike. He paused at the door, his helmet under his arm. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the terror behind her anger. He soughed. "I'll be careful. Promise. Just a few more shifts." He kissed her forehead, leaving a smudge of grease. She watched him leave, the taillights of his truck disappearing into the morning mist. She had a bad feeling, the kind that sits in your throat and tastes like copper. It was a Tuesday, the graveyard shift. Caleb was operating the shuttle car. His job was to run the coal from the continuous miner to the belt. Back and forth, back and forth. It was monotonous work, rhythmic. The hypnotic nature of it was the danger. You zoned out. He was thinking about the wedding. He was thinking about the color of the napkins Maggie had picked out. Peach. He didn't care about napkins, but he cared that she cared. He turned the corner into the main haulage way. The ceiling here was supposed to be secure, bolted and strapped. But the mountain has a memory, and it holds a grudge. He didn't hear the crack. He felt it, a vibration that traveled up through the tires of the shuttle car. He looked up just as a kettle-bottom, a massive, fossilized tree trunk embedded in the ceiling, slipped loose. It weighed 3 tons. Caleb slammed the reverse lever, but the shuttle car was sluggish. The rock came down. It missed the cab by inches, but it clipped the canopy. The steel roof of the machine crumpled like tin foil. The force of the impact threw the shuttle car sideways, slamming it into the coal rib. Caleb was thrown against the controls. His ribs cracked. A scream tore from his throat as the metal pinned his leg. Then, silence. Dust swirled in the beam of his cap lamp. "Help!" he gasped, but the air was knocked out of him. "Man downed! Man down!" The darkness closed in. The pain was a white-hot lance in his side. But his first thought wasn't about the pain. It was about Maggie. It was about the promise. 5 years. I promised her. 5 years. Above ground, the siren wailed. Maggie was at the diner closing up. She heard it. Everyone heard it. The spoon dropped from her hand, clattering loudly on the floor. She didn't wait for a phone call. She didn't wait for news. She ripped her apron off and ran to her car. The waiting room at the mine office was a place of purgatory. Green walls, flickering fluorescent lights, the smell of stale coffee and fear. Maggie sat in a plastic chair, her hands gripping her purse so hard her knuckles were white. Other wives were there. Some were crying, some were praying. The foreman, a man named Big John, came out. He took off his hard hat. "Mrs. Halloway?" he asked. Maggie stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. "I'm not Mrs. Halloway yet." "Is he?" "He's alive," Big John said quickly. The breath whooshed out of her. "He's hurt, Maggie." The canopy collapsed. Broken ribs broke his leg pretty bad, but the boys got him out. "He's on his way to the hospital in Lexington." Maggie nodded. She didn't cry. She went into operational mode. She was a miner's daughter. She knew the drill. Drive to the hospital. Sign the papers. Wait for the doctor. She drove to Lexington in a daze. When she walked into his room, Caleb looked small. He was a big man, but in the hospital bed, covered in wires and casts, he looked like a boy. His face was still streaked with coal dust that the nurses hadn't been able to scrub off yet. She sat beside him. He opened his eyes. They were hazy with morphine. "Mags," he croaked. "I'm here. Caleb LeCar." "The car, ... double quotes," he whispered. "I think I wrecked the shuttle car." "Hush," she smoothed his hair back. "I don't care about the car. I'm sorry," he said, a tear cutting a clean line through the dust on his cheek. "I almost didn't make it." "But you did." "I saw it coming, Megs. I saw the rock, and all I could think was, I'm gonna leave her with a dress and no groom." Maggie went silent. The anger she had felt earlier, the fear, it crystallized into something hard. "You're quitting," she said. "It wasn't a question." Caleb looked at the ceiling. "I can't. I don't know how to do anything else. The garage, we don't have the money yet." "I don't care about the money." Her voice rose, cracking. "I can wait tables. We can live in a trailer. I don't care, Caleb. I can't do this. I can't wait for the siren every night." "I won't do it. It's who I am, Maggie. It's what I do." "Then you do it alone." She stood up and walked to the window. It was the hardest thing she had ever said. It was an ultimatum, him or the mine. Caleb was in the hospital for 2 weeks. Maggie visited every day, but the distance between them was palpable. She brought him food, she helped him shave, but they didn't talk about the future. When he was discharged, he went back to his parents' house His leg was in a cast from hip to toe. He had a lot of time to think. He sat on the porch, watching the trucks drive by, heading to the mine. He felt the pull, the brotherhood, the paycheck. But then he looked at the empty seat beside him. He realized that the mine would always be there. The coal wasn't going anywhere. It had been there for 1,000,000 years. It would wait. But Maggie was a once-in-a-lifetime vein. If he lost her, he'd never find that seam again. 6 weeks later, Caleb crouched his way into the diner. It was late. The lunch rush was over. Maggie was wiping down the counter. She saw him in the mirror. She froze. He hobbled over to the booth. He sat down with a groan. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice tight. "No?" he said. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a piece of paper. It was wrinkled. "Read this." Maggie took it. It was an acceptance letter. Not from a bank, from the community college in Hazard. "Diesel mechanic program. I start in the fall," he said. "GI Bill will cover some of it, since my dad served. The rest." "Well, I sold the truck." Maggie looked up. "Ehrlich, why? You sold your truck? You loved that truck." "I love you more," Caleb said. His voice was steady. The gravel was still there, but the hardness was gone. "I'm done, Mags. I turned in my badge today. No more underground." Maggie didn't care who was watching. She came around the counter. She didn't hug him gentle. She grabbed him. She buried her face in his neck, smelling the soap and the faint, fading scent of the mine. "You're sure?" she asked into his shoulder. Sure. I'd rather fix engines in the daylight than dig gold in the dark, if it means I get to come home to you." The wedding was in June, just like they planned. Caleb stood at the altar with a cane. But he stood tall. They built that house on the ridge. It took 10 years instead of 5. Caleb opened his garage, Halloway and Sons, though at the time he didn't have any sons. 30 years later, Caleb sits on the porch swing. His limp is still there when the rain comes. His lungs are a little scarred, a reminder of the dust he breathed. But he breathes easy. Maggie comes out with 2 cups of coffee. She's older now, her hair gray, but her eyes are the same. She hands him the cup. "Siren blew last night," Caleb says, looking out over the valley. "I heard it," Maggie says softly. "Prayed for Em." "Me too." They sit in silence, listening to the birds. They look down at the valley floor, where the black trucks still rumble, carrying the load. Caleb reaches out and takes Maggie's hand. His hand is stained with grease now, not coal. Oil and grease, the mark of a life lived in the sun. He squeezes her hand. She squeezes back. They know the cost. They know they are the lucky ones. The ones who got out, the ones who chose the heart over the mountain. And as the sun sets over Harlan County, painting the sky in purples and reds, Caleb Halloway knows he made the right trade.